Rakib. How are you doing? So I'm Jose and I'm a tech lead at Turing, and I'll be taking your interview today. Okay, I'm Montreal, Canada, and at Turing, my main focus is on hiring the best engineers and help them with the vetting process. I have more than 17 years of experience in the software industry with expertise in JavaScript, and I have been giving and taking multiple interview, and I hope this turn out to be a great experience for you. How are you doing? How is your day doing so far?
Hey, Jose, really nice to meet you. I'm Rakib from Bangladesh. It's an absolute pleasure to be on. I've been programming for around 8 years now, and I started my career with technologies such as Java, but in the last few years, I've switched to JavaScript-based technologies, and I absolutely love what I do, and I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Nice. And I don't know anything about Java. I never heard. I never wrote any language of Java. My focus always was JavaScript. So, okay, I would like to hear a little bit more from your side. So could you tell me about yourself and tell me what kind of language project have you been working on? What's language framework? So what is your expertise now?
So like I said before, I've been working for maybe the last 8 years, and I've kind of moved from company to company. I've worked as a contractor with companies. I've had full-time jobs, and because of that, I've had to use different sort of technologies recently. I've done programming with Java. I've written Android apps. I've also written some iOS apps. Recently, it's mostly been JavaScript. I'm trying to think of an interesting project that I worked on recently. I guess one of the, let me talk a little about the one that I've been working on right now. It's a finance app for a company called Meltwater. They have their own kind of APIs that they have their own system that keeps track of stock markets and cryptocurrencies a bit. And I was tasked with writing a front end for that basically consumes those APIs and shows the UI in kind of a format that their analysts need.
Nice. And what technology have you been used there?
Okay, so for the front end, it's been exclusively React. I did not have to do any backend stuff there because the APIs were already available.
All right. And do you use any framework with React.JS or just React.JS?
Just vanilla React.JS.
Just React.JS. And the project is built on top of class-based components or function components with React.
So it's a recent project. Like I was part like it. I mean, in a lot of cases, you have to deal with legacy code bases where you kind of have to decide. Since this was started maybe 6 months ago, I decided to go with functional components.
Wow, good choice. Good choice. I believe good choice. But do you have experience to work on projects with class-based components as well?
Yeah, I've done that.
And in your understanding, so how would you explain me, okay, the difference between work with React class components, which is the old version, it's considered the old version now, and with function components with React hooks. So what's the difference between them? And if you are going to start a new project today, which one do you choose?
So it really depends. I will first answer which one I would choose, and then use that answer to go into. So if the project does not have a lot of complicated state, if I don't have to manage a lot of complicated state, I would choose functional components. It's easier to think about. It's easier to reason about. I really like hooks. They're very easy for me to reason about. But if the project had complicated logic, if I wanted more control, I would probably pick React class components because lifecycle hooks, not all of the lifecycle hooks have corresponding React hooks at the moment. confusing words. I mean, not all of the lifecycle events that you can hook into in React components have their corresponding React hooks. So if I wanted to use Redux, for example, I would probably use class components. But the other way to think about is mixing and matching. So for example, if you have simpler components that have simpler state to manage, maybe a better approach is to just write a functional component for that. And other components that require more control, more granular control, because you get those lifecycle hooks, it's probably a good idea to use class components.
Great answer. And this is the kind of answer that I like. Just wanna mention that. So you give me a complete answer. This make total difference. Well, when I look to you, I know that I can trust you. If I ask you something, if you give me answers like this, I will love it. So thanks for your questions. So I've learned a lot from you so far. And I would like you to explain. My next question is, I would like you to explain for me, let's suppose I don't know anything about React.JS, okay? So how React.JS work? So React.JS, I know React.JS is a library, it's not a framework, right? So I've heard about the Reactive Virtual Dom. How could you explain me the Reactive Virtual Dom to me?
So the way I would explain it is, imagine you only know HTML and you don't really know programming beyond HTML, right? And now you're writing your own HTML elements that, you're writing a p tag and it does certain things. You're writing div tag, it does certain things. React would be, in its simplest form, the ability to write HTML elements, React components, with added functionality that you described with JavaScript. That's the simplest explanation of it. You're writing HTML components, but you're adding logic to it with JavaScript. Okay, so that's
good.
one.
Good. You are good. And how do you explain the Reactive Virtual Dom for a technical person? Let's suppose now, so I know React.js, I am a senior developer in your company, and we are talking about the Virtual Dom. So what's the Virtual Dom? So if I asked you about this.
Okay, so let me talk about the old days. In the old days, we would use something like jQuery and manipulate the DOM. I want the color of a button to change. So I would kind of reference that. I would get a reference to that button, modify it, and then directly manipulate the DOM. React kind of changes that. React maintains the representation of the UI in the programming language. It's not a React concept. The concept of virtual DOM is maintaining the representation of the UI in the programming language itself, in the code itself, and then using a library to sync with the real DOM. In the case of React, it's done with React DOM. So you're kind of creating the UI and maintaining that state, let's say, imperative, declaring, I want the color of the button to be green or red. You're holding that state, that representation of the UI in the programming object, in the programming language itself in memory. React DOM, behind the scenes, would sync that with the real DOM. And the good thing about it is a programming language is better at deciding what to sync, what changed, what did not change, so that process is optimized. So when you're coding with React, instead of you manipulating the DOM yourself, you using it through a virtual library means the rendering process is much more optimized and faster.
Great. And so let's suppose we have just a comment. So you mentioned old times for me, old times is before jQuery. I started before jQuery. So it's crazy, right? It's a long time ago. Internet Explorer was like the best browser at the moment, even better than Firefox. So can you believe this? Yeah, so I used to program for JavaScript for Internet Explorer, and so great. And my question related to the Virtual DOM again. So you mentioned the Virtual DOM is not built by React.js, right? It's a concept. So is there any other framework that use the same concepts with the the virtual DOM to update the DOM? Or it's React.JS?
So I think it's Vue Js also does the same. I'm not sure about Angular. If Angular, yeah, I think Angular also uses virtual DOM, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay, cool. All right. One more question. I'm sorry. Can you go ahead?
Yeah, that was my answer. Vue Js, however it's pronounced that.
Yeah, Vue Js definitely use the virtual DOM. It's a bit different from React.js. Related to virtual DOM. So let's suppose we have a button click, okay? And in that click, so we are using React hooks. And in that click, we have 4 set states. So will React.js update state by state and trigger re-render, or React.js will get that state, all of that state, it just trigger one re-render?
Okay, I'm not completely clear about the question, but let's say I have a button. I click on that button.
Yeah.
State changes.
Yes.
How do I change that state?
So you have 4 calls to set state. You have, let's suppose you want to change the name, or you want to change the avatar, the age of the user, and then you have to calculate something. It's 4 calls, 4 functions. That click will call 4 functions. Will React.js go one by one, set state, trigger re-render, or React.js will set all of them and trigger just one re-render?
Okay, so that's something I actually have to think about a little, but without actually testing, my suspicion is that there will be some optimization. And,
yeah, you are good. Yes, you are good, because there's a updating batch that's integrate now in React.js. So React.js will update in batch, so it will update all the states and trigger just one re-render, unless you tell React.js that force each re-render. Cool. All right. So what kind of tools for global state management are you familiarized with? You mentioned Redux, right? So can you explain me how Redux works?
So Redux doesn't really have anything to do with React. It's a separate state management library where we create a state tree, and so let's say I have a store object where I maintain the entire state of the object, state of the UI in that tree, right? And anything changes, I fire an event saying, I fire an action saying this changed. And then I have reducers, which handles that and makes the necessary changes. So basically, Redux is maintaining the entire state of an application in one object. The reason it works well with React is because React can simply use that state tree and render the UI. And one of the advantages of Redux is, let's say I have an application that is crashing for some reason. If someone gives me the object state, the state tree, at that point, I can reproduce it. I can go back.
Nice.
Go front.
Is there any tools for that help you to work with that global state?
When you say tools, do you mean like a debugging tool, like an extension?
Yes. Yeah.
I forgot the name of it, but yeah, there are a few Redux extensions that let you kind of go from state to state, fire actions. I forgot the exact name.
Okay, great. All right. So, and how can we test a React application? What are the best practice in order to test a React application?
Okay, so the good thing about React is that the data flow is unidirectional generally, unless you change it yourself. So let's say I write a component, right? And the state of the component depends on the props that I'm passing from the parent, right? So one good way to test that React is kind of using some test library, passing the components and checking the state. Okay, so given this props, I expect the component to behave this way.
Okay, and what kind of libraries are you familiarized with?
So I haven't done a lot of React testing, to be honest. So I would have to kind of go
but
back
that's
and
okay.
see.
That's okay, right? So I see people that doesn't work with React testing too much, unity testing too much, right? Yeah, there's a couple libraries that we can use. The most famous one is Jest. Okay, we can use Jest to test React.JS application.
I have used Jest quite a lot, but not in the context of React.
Yeah, and there's a lot more libraries that you can combine with Jest. Jasmine to test a React application. So if you are looking for tests, so you can test unit tests, you can have functional tests, you can have UI tests, okay, CSS tests. So when I say CS tests, and I'm not saying that you're going to test the CS itself. You're going to test the UI after render. You know, there's a library called Backstop.js that use image comparison and highlight CSS change. Yeah, and then there's a lot of tools for functional testing that we can integrate with and test React.js application. Okay, but that's okay because I know I've seen people not testing React.js. They are relying on QC teams to test, which is also another way to test a React application.
It's something right? I will probably need to look into. Yeah, it's always a good thing to write code.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have any experience deploying a React application?
Yeah, some experience with deploying React. So normally what I do is just build the application, you know, and then serve it with something like Nginx. Like I've mostly served it with Nginx. Okay,
great. Do you have experience with Docker or let's start with Docker. Do you have experience Docker to?
Yeah, some. Yeah, like I've like most of the time I write APIs I use to containerize them. Okay,
great. So I love Docker. So I don't see myself working without Docker anymore, especially because in a few companies that you are working on has some security policies. You cannot, I would say, install anything in your Mac or in your PC. So let's suppose you want to run Node.js. So you cannot install Node.js because of their policies. So if you are running Node.js inside a Docker, there you can do anything you want. You can install npm, you can install yarn, you can install any library inside that Docker container, and then you can run your React application. You can also mirror production inside of the Docker, right? So and then you are running your application with the same environment in production, but the old school was Vagrant. So I started with Vagrant like years ago, mirror production environment, and run React application, run Node.js applications, run PHP. So then I moved to Docker, and it's much more easy now, even for React application. Yeah, great. So great talk today, sir. Let's see what I can ask you and more. So, okay. Quick question, but I expect a great answer. What are the best practice to use React.js?
Okay, so it depends. I mean, it depends. I guess it varies from company to company.
Yeah, what's your best practice? What do you consider as the best practice?
For me, like modularizing React, that's very important. Great. Any component, like it's the single responsibility principle that's always true in programming. A component should not be responsible for anything beyond what, simple things, small things. If I want something, if I need something reusable across my application, I would create one component and reuse that everywhere. So that's one of the practices that I feel is important. Some of the other, I guess always using a linter is a good idea. Because, you can shut off that part of your brain that needs to think about code formatting and let the editor handle that. What else? Single components, as I already talked about. Linter. I don't know, like using linter kind of helps a lot with all of those best practices.
Yeah.
So for example, if I want to write a event handler, right? Instead of writing on click, all lowercase, something like camel case on capital C or ICK, that's better. It's readable for everyone. Using ES6 syntax is also good instead of using React.component, using class components. That's also a good idea. Preferring functional components over class components when the component doesn't have to deal with too many complicated states.
All right. So yeah, you shared a few ones that I like it too. And how about code splitting? What do you understand about code splitting?
So generally, when I'm loading an application, like I haven't done a lot of code splitting, but conceptually, if I'm writing an application, instead of loading the entire JavaScript code, it's a good idea to split code. So components that are not required and not loaded in the initial node, but they're loaded later when they're actually used.
Makes sense. And how can we code split a React application?
So I haven't exactly done that. I'll have to look it up. My sense is when you're using something like create React app or Webpack, the default configuration kind of handles.
Yeah, exactly. There's two concepts about code splitting. One is modularize your application, create small components that you can reuse them. The best practice are don't import all your functional components with asterisks, for example. That will be hard for Webpack to split the code and load only the components that will be loading that screen. So the best practice, load component by component, create small component that then we can manage that by Webpack, create React app as well to code splitting and make the application load faster. So that's what we are looking for, right? So performance, scalability, and make everything work fast, right? All right, so thanks for your interview today. I have a couple more questions. We can have another meeting to talk about another question. I can like you. I would pass you for sure for the next step at Turing, and it will be my pleasure to work with you. I'd like you on my team. I'd like to work with you, and that was my final question. And I'll give you a tip for our audience. So if you are looking for React.js positions, okay, this question that I asked today, it's a kind of question that we usually ask them. I mean, not this way, so because the interview is unique by developers, so I like to go over their experience and ask questions and follow-up questions. That's why the interview is unique per developer, right? So if you are looking for a job, go to turing.com/jobs, find the job that you would like to work with, create your profile at Turing, and then when you pass to the vetting process, you'll be ready to work, and I'll be more than happy to interview you for one position. Okay, as that said, thank you, Rakib. That was my pleasure to talk with you today. And as I mentioned before, I would pass you for sure. I'd like to work with you. Great talk today, and I hope to see you again. Okay, any final tips, advice for who would like to learn React.js, so about the vetting process for our audience?
I would just say get started. A lot of times we think about, I'm going to read this, I'm going to do that. I would just say, start writing React code. It's not very difficult. Once you start, it's very easy to pick up. And Documentation at React.js.com or React.js.org. I'm not sure. The official Facebook's documentation, it's very good. It's top notch. Reading that is probably one of the fastest way to start learning React.
Great tips. And to everybody else here, thank you for turning this mock interview in a series. We're going to create a mock interview. So if you are interested to hear more, to see more mock interview in this channel, please consider give a thumbs up, write a comment that what kind of mock interview you would like to see, C#, Java, PHP, anyone, we can make that. This is the second chapter for this series, and I hope you guys enjoy that as much as I did with Rakib. We'll back with many more episodes covering very different tech stack and language, as I mentioned before. If you're looking for some more specific interview, just let us know, okay? Drop a message in the comment section below, and don't forget to give us a big fat thumbs up. Take care, stay safe, wash your hands, and that's it for today.